mean, it's got, obviously having a green roof has benefits like creating habitat, but you know, one of the things that it really is incredible at is creating a really stable environment inside. So the insulation that you get from, you know, what we've got is soil, we've got an air gap, water, DuraPanel, air pocket, and then more DuraPanel. Scientists at CSIRO estimated that the R rating on that roof system like this is R15, so you get this huge insulative factor. So in summer you don't get any heat gain through the roof, but you also don't get any heat loss in winter. And it's also amazing in bushfire. So when we've tested this roof system in bushfire, we got the temperature over a 45-minute period up to 1250 degrees, full flame. So the flames were completely covering the building. And the temperature 2 centimeters below the top of the soil didn't change. So we had it really kept the building consistent. So even though we had 1250 degrees outside the building, inside the building, it got up to, went from 24 to 27 degrees. Ultimately, once the fire stopped, over time it got to 30. And then the other benefit, of course, is because we're only using natural materials, there's no off-gassing. So when the building is being exposed to such extreme flame, there's no chemicals coming off the products because we're using things like straw and natural materials. So, you know, there's no off-gassing issues. And so, yeah, my dream is that every building ever built, imagine, you know, we've got to build another 2 billion buildings in the next 40 years, apparently, on Earth. That's a huge opportunity to create habitat. And what people don't realize is that, you know, what we've replaced here was pasture. So there was grass here, there were a few trees, but the diversity wasn't really that great. But once this building's finished, there will actually be more biodiversity here than what was before. And we can really ramp that up. And actually, I think that houses can actually be as biodiverse as, say, the Daintree rainforest or the Amazon rainforest, or just by manipulating the species that you use and actually utilizing the vertical gardens and you know, the vertical walls and north-facing walls, as well as the south-facing walls for species like vanilla that don't like direct sun. So yeah, I see buildings as an opportunity to create habitat, and that's why the motto for this school is, why build a school when you can build an ecosystem? And that's really what we've done here. And yeah, I'm really proud of this green roof. I can't wait to see it grow and evolve and succeed. Yeah, so wicking beds was an invention by an Australian guy called Colin Austin, who's still alive, bit of a legend. And he was asked by World Vision in 1984 to find a solution for the famine in Ethiopia. And he went to Ethiopia as a guest, and then realized that the food was not nutrient dense. He could taste that there was no nutrients in the food, and it was because they had huge weather events, like huge rain events, that would leach all the nutrients from the soil, and then of course no rain for long periods of time, which would dry the soil out. So he convinced them to start creating channels and trenches, lined them with plastic, and that meant that the water would not run away and then filled it with rubble and boulders and soil. And that meant that the nutrients wouldn't run away, but it also meant that the water would stay there and could be used, could be wicked up by the soil when it was needed. So that was really, you know, the first time that wicking beds were being used, and then it kind of took off in the 90s, especially in the US. And I started using it for my projects about 5 years ago, and I was just blown away by how much better the food tasted when it was grown in a wicking bed, and of course how little water you use, because there's nothing leaching out. So there's no nutrients leaching out, but there's also no water leaching out. So every time you have a rain event, this acts like a bathtub basically, and just holds onto the water. And it allows, when it's dry, it allows the soil, pulls it back up. So I started experimenting with a green roof design using that idea. And this is now my third project. And yeah, it works so well. The other good thing about it is that the top of the soil stays dry, and so if you get weed seeds blowing in, they can't germinate because the top of the soil, so normally you would irrigate and the top of the soil would be wet. Because the water comes from underneath, it stays really dry. So I reckon this is one of the best Australian inventions of all time. I think Colin's in his 80s now, living in far north Queensland, still growing veggies, but I always try and, you know, attribute this design to him because I think, yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah, so Sam Cox, Louis, who works at Sam Cox, has put a lot of time and energy talking to butterfly experts and also identifying which species in the area are gone, like they have disappeared, mainly because of pests like rabbits and mice. And so there's quite a few species that we're planting up here and then later inoculating the roof with endangered butterflies. Once they're inoculated, we're going to manage the landscape on this roof so that those butterflies don't die. So rather than mulching and trimming, we'll be cutting and dropping so that the egg larvae that sits on the foliage will survive the winter and allow it to go through its full life cycle. So yeah, this whole roof has been designed really to allow endangered Australian butterflies to thrive, especially in this area because there's been so much development, agriculture, horticulture, loss of biodiversity. A lot of, you know, the beautiful butterflies that existed here pre-colonization, we're hoping to bring back. And so this is kind of like a safe haven. There's obviously no foxes, no cats, no rabbits. So it'll become a safe haven not only for butterflies, but I'm hoping for birds as well. And being right next to the nature reserve, which is fox-proof as well, I think this will allow that to, you know, continue on further into the landscape. And the other thing is, of course, a big issue globally in cities is the heat island effect. So you've got all these buildings, concrete, asphalt, rooftops that are getting hot. And it just makes cities even hotter. When you use green roofs and vertical gardens, you have a really dramatic effect. And it's really interesting that a lot of work is being done in Austria. Austria are kind of world leaders at green roofs. And they say a green roof, 100 square meters of green roof absorbs the pollution of 35 cars. So we've got 650 or 700 square meters of green roof here. So potentially all the cars that are turning up here to drop off kids, and you know, we're absorbing all the pollution from that green roof. And how that works is everybody assumes that the plants absorb the pollution, so the leaves of the plants, but we now know that it's actually the biology in the soil that absorbs pollution. And when you take plants out of that soil, the soil dies. So it's like they coexist and they thrive. And one of the things that happens in soil is when soil dries out, all the biology dies. So every time soil dries out, biology dies, and then when it rains, it has to start from nothing again. And so one of the reasons why wicking bed is so incredible from a biology point of view is it never dries out. So you've got this incredible biology in the soil, which means that it acts like this living organism that becomes even better at absorbing pollution, things like benzene and formaldehyde and toxins in the air, and they just get eaten up by the biology, by the bacteria and the fungi and all these things. So, you know, I think it's a real shame that it's taken us so long to embrace green roofs, but I do believe that in the future, you know, they'll be mandated because it just makes too much sense.